Welcome back, everybody. Well, attention taxpayers, the debate over extending Bush tax cuts continues. You know that. But some of the math being used by those arguing against extending the cuts looks a little bit hazy, according to our next guest. It's time for a reality check. Introducing Veronique de Rugy. She's Senior Research Fellow for the Mercatus Center at George Mason University. Veronique does what's called a regression analysis. Don't go anywhere. We're going to explain all this. That means going through data that's put out by the government, in this case, to see if the statements being drawn from the data are accurate. So, Veronique, you've been working on President Obama's claim that extending the Bush tax cuts would deepen the deficit. Tell us about the logic about that statement.
Well, first, hi.
Hello.
My
so
pleasure.
Nice to see you.
Very nice seeing you. So, I mean, the first assumption, right, is that I guess the government owns everything we make, and basically if it let us keep more of our stuff, it's actually worsening the budget deficit, which is kind of something I
Where have you been all my life?
So it's not true, you're saying. So
so extend the cuts, and the numbers that the president is always using is like if you extend the cuts for 10 years, especially on the top income earner, you're going to actually save, or you're going to actually raise revenue by $700 billion. And you have to put this in perspective of how much money we're going to be spending in the next 10 years, right? To use the same measure he is, and we're going to be spending $42 trillion. So basically, if you want to put it in the same unit, you have $42 trillion of spending that is scheduled, and you're going to have a raise in revenue, assuming that taxpayers don't decide to just stop working altogether, of $0.7 trillion. It's nothing. It doesn't even scratch the surface.
Well, I love that the president says we're not going to just give these millionaires and billionaires money, as if you're giving them money, forgetting that it's their money to start with.
And also that they are already the one paying the biggest share of all the income tax. I mean, and they're already contributing.
Are we going
to? So your point is we don't have a revenue problem.
No, we have a spending problem.
We have a spending problem.
We have listen, I mean, if you want to know, that's astonishing. And it's not a spending problem that started the last 2 years. It's a spending problem that started long ago. But the last
Democrats
10 years,
alike, correct?
Exactly. I mean, the last 10 years, we've almost multiplied the budget by 100% under 8 years of Republican ruling, right? Almost 100%. And in fact, by the way, when we hear that if we cut spending,
right,
we're going to starve people, I don't think in 2000 people were starving. Did you hear that?
No, but on the other hand, I have to say that we have our Laffer on here sometimes, and he says if you don't extend the Bush tax cuts, we're going to have an absolute catastrophe. Now that's going a little bit overboard as well, isn't it?
A catastrophe, like of what type? As in,
the economy will collapse if you don't extend the Bush tax cuts, is what he's saying.
That's the problem also with the Republicans, right? They have been very, very, very good at actually fighting tax increases, but they kind of overstayed their case. They always say, if you let the top marginal rates go up by 4%, the economy will collapse. No, it's not good for the economy, but the economy will not collapse. And we've seen it in the 90s, right, under Clinton.
Right. Let's talk about another claim, and that is closing all the tax loopholes as a way to address the deficit. So what do you say to that?
Well, it's the same thing. If you close all the favorite loopholes, all the things that, at some point the Deficit Commission, people was thinking about it. If you look at over 10 years, roughly you would say $4.8 trillion over 10 years, just cutting all the loopholes.
Sounds like a lot.
Yeah, but again.
But including the mortgage interest deduction and child credits.
That's $90 billion a year, so you time 10, right?
That's still less than the Department of Education's budget.
Well, no, actually,
$106 billion this year.
Well, that's because of the stimulus. Well, even though there's nothing.
Bottom line, your point is, wait. So does it really affect the deficit?
Well, actually, it might raise some revenue if you assume people are not going to stop working. But here's the thing: if I'm a business person and I come to you and I say, Carol, Matt, my business is in trouble, right? I'm losing my customers. I'm about to go bankrupt. And I say, but I have an idea. I'm going to raise the price of my goods. You're going to tell me I'm nuts.
Right.
And this is what raising taxes in a depressed economy does, right? It's basically, in order to get revenue, you need a thriving economy. You don't need to actually hit people over the head and actually give them a disincentive to work and produce wealth. And it's the exact same thing. So it's a bad idea.
Which is what, I was thinking about this when I saw claim number 3. To get out of our debt crisis, everything should be on the table, even a tax increase. What do you think about that?
Well, I certainly think that all the spending needs to be on the table, even the sacred cow. Entitlement, defense spending, non-defense spending. But the problem, again, is you want to raise, first, you have to also understand that there is so much the government can do to raise taxes because actually people react. Historically, the federal government has not been able to raise tax revenue for a very long time, just a few years, past 19% of GDP.
By the way, does the CBO take this into account when they look at?
So not in their baseline, but in their alternative baseline, which basically kind of take under consideration much more realistic policy options.
And we can't tax our way out of this, is your point.
You can't tax our way out of it. And by the way, message to the Republican, we can't grow ourselves out of it either because we can't raise that much revenue. And the gap, the gigantic explosion in spending is going to be way above 19% of GDP.
All right, so we have to cut spending and we can't touch taxes, you're saying, or shouldn't.
Well, it's a bad idea. Should I raise my prices when my business is in close to bankruptcy?
It sounds like a bad idea to me, too. Thanks so much for joining us, Veronique de Rugy from the Mercatus Institute.